Thank you very much. So here I am. Welcome to everybody. Thank you firstly to Johanna and Yunin for setting up today. I'm excited to share the Innovation Toolkit with you. As has been introduced, my name is Baron. I am part of the team here at the United Nations System Staff College in Turin, Italy. We have been under lockdown for 2 or 3 weeks now, so I'm joining you from my spare room here in Italy, but things are going well, and I am excited to undertake this session with you today. So let's move on. As Johanna has indicated, we will be taking questions on Slido. I am happy to answer any of those questions, and as we go through the session today, please do let me know if you have any other questions. If I do not have time or I do not have the resources to answer at this time, I will be happy to share those answers either directly with you, or I can share with Johanna and she can make those available to everybody online. I will be also running these sessions with Johanna, examining the other elements of the toolkit in the coming weeks. So we look forward to working with you on that. To move on, the Innovation Toolkit. Now this is the web address of the toolkit, un-innovation.tools/register, and just a question, and I can see that it is a live poll already on Slido. Have you explored the UN Innovation Toolkit yet? So if you want to just take a moment at Slido and just let us know, the poll is running, as far as I understand. I can see some raised hands, that's good, thank you. Now, the great thing, I'll cover this in a moment, just while the responses to this are coming in, the toolkit is about one of the really exciting things about the toolkit is that it is available to anybody. It is available to anybody, within the UN. There is a drop-down list that you are able to click on at this web address, at this register web address. And in fact, it has been developed as a common good. So there is the option also for people from outside of the UN to click through and to utilize the tools inside as well. So let's move on. We have 27 people so far indicating their use of the toolkit. I'm just going to open the chat here. Just some wonderful comments from engaged people. That's good. Thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. Let's move on. So, as Johanna has indicated, the toolkit was developed by the UN for the UN. One of the critical elements in the design phase of this, and of course Johanna and UN members will know more than myself, but one of the key elements of pushback that we receive when we start talking about innovation within the UN, and this has been mirrored in the training that the UNSSC has undertaken with 200 or 300 managers so far, P5D1 managers from within the system. One of the key elements of pushback that we get when we start discussing innovation is that a lot of the tools, a lot of the insight, a lot of the stories that have been, that are available online, for example, are based in the private sector. And there is a dearth, there is a lack of information from within the system. Of course, UNIN, as you know, as people who are familiar with UNIN through webinars such as this and engagement with the network, UNIN is one of the key elements that is starting to share these stories. It's a fantastic resource within the system, but at a greater level, one of the areas of pushback that was received was that there was not these UN examples. So from its starting point, the case studies that you will find in each of the tools is based upon UN examples, UN case studies, to allow for contextualization, to allow for insight, and obviously it's nice to see this familiarity with even coming down to the words that are used, the language that is used within those case studies. From our side at the UNSSC, we view the toolkit as a living resource. We will be working to refine the tools, to update the tools. And in fact, we are just in the starting processes of undertaking a redesign of the toolkit, even though it was only launched in November last year, incorporating more engagement tools and social engagement tools. So you're better able to, from within the system, the ecosystem of the toolkit, you'll be better able to share stories of use, share stories of contextualization. But we'll let people know more about that in the coming weeks as we further develop that. The logos that you see here, all part of the testing and the entities that engaged in the design of the toolkit, again, sourcing those case studies. Where am I? Okay, so one of the areas that people have really started to hinge around in our training around the toolkit and in the stories that we are collecting of the toolkit and of use and contextualization is a continued misunderstanding, really, about a definition of innovation. It's very difficult realistically to define, and I'm sure that Johanna could share a number of stories around this as well. But this is the definition that the Secretary General has utilized and was incorporated into a lot of the design elements of the toolkit. We can do things differently, and we can do different things. Innovation is not only the most sophisticated technologies, sometimes it's the simplest of things. We often get pushback. We often get questions coming from our participants, from people working to utilize the toolkit, examining innovation or defining innovation as Tesla and Bitcoin and drones. And of course, this is all absolutely true. This is all wonderful, wonderful innovation. However, there is also this flip side of it, whereby innovation can be as simple as doing things differently and doing different things. So the scope of innovation is really up to you, up to the teams that you have, the resources that you have, and being able to analyze what it is that is available to you, what changes and transitions you can make. And certain tools within the toolkit allow you to have those conversations and guide you through those processes. And I will be introducing some of those tools very, very briefly today in name only, but then we'll go deeper into those over the coming weeks. Now, what is the toolkit? So the toolkit, one of the key elements of the toolkit is a diagnostic tool, which consists of 27 questions, which evaluates from the perspective of your team, your unit, or your organization, how ready you are to innovate. It identifies your current capabilities and your needs and challenges. As you can see from the image there, it has been designed, the toolkit has been designed to be accessible online, on your PC, but also through mobile and through your tablet as well. This is the web address, un-innovation.tools, as indicated at the start of the session. Now, what I'm going to do actually is just jump out of the presentation and show you the process that we go through when you are logging in. So this is the website that the toolkit is on. You will register yourself. You will receive an email inviting you to then log in. And this is the process. Once we load up, here we go. This is the first screen that you have. Now here, you have a quote from the Secretary General outlining innovation in general. Through here, we have a getting started guide. Now, the critical element of this getting started guide is breaking down the toolkit so that you, as a team member or as a team leader, are able to have conversations with people within your team, have conversations up, have conversations across, have conversations with people who you are able to have impact with. And this outlines, breaks down some of the feedback that you get from the diagnostic tool and allows you, it gives you structured discussion starter points and processes that you're able to engage with people so that you can start to discuss, what does innovation mean for us? What does it mean for our team, our unit, or our organization? And critically, what can we next do? You are able from the start to access all of the tools. However, what I want to encourage you to please do when you do log in is to take the diagnostic over here on the left-hand side. Now, when you click on that, you can select which aspect, which perspective you are going to take the test, the diagnostic from. Now, the great thing about the toolkit also is that it remembers, it saves your previous scores on this diagnostic, so you are able to use the information gained through this diagnostic as a baseline, undertake an intervention, and then come back and take the diagnostic again to track change within that. And you'll see how that can be more beneficial as we move through. But I'm going to take this from the viewpoint of my unit, for example. And then we start this process. Now you'll note our little rocket ships, we have planets. The meaning behind that will become clear, but you have this question here. My team, unit, or organization knows what resources and capabilities we need to achieve our goals. You can consider that from a unit point of view, from a team point of view, from an organizational point of view, and you can start to consider, how do we feel about that? You can either strongly disagree all the way up to strongly agree. For the purposes of today's session, I'm going to agree. Question 2, my team, unit, or organization has a clearly defined set of goals for innovation. Yeah, I'll agree with that. Why not? The goals of my team, unit, organization for innovation are aligned with our team, unit, or organization's broader goals and challenges. I disagree with that. The goals of my team, unit, or organization for innovation drive specific activities and initiatives. Again, I disagree. And as you can see, you can start having conversations around these questions. You can start thinking for yourself. You can start engaging with your team or your unit where possible to start really thinking, what is innovation? What does it mean for us? And what possibilities exist? I'm going to go quickly through these. I'm going to pretend I'm having a conversation, an in-depth conversation with my stakeholders, but you can see here, my team, unit, or organization considers how an innovation could be scaled at the beginning of each project. Do we think about that? Yeah, we probably think about that. How aware are we? So again, a chance for you to have these conversations, and of course these are relevant to your own team or your unit, and so it's important that you have these discussions, or at least spend some time to consider what this means for you. Now, once you have undertaken all of these questions, once you've had this conversation, you are then exposed to what is called a profile. Now, in this case, just by random answering of the profile, you'll see here of the diagnostic, you'll see here that the diagnostic has outlined my profile as being that of collaborator. You can see here it tells me collaborators are the strongest at developing partnerships for innovation. Effective collaborators actively engage broader ecosystems of actors to drive innovation and effectively identify partners, etc., etc. So it's telling you what some of your strengths are. However, then also tells you about some of your weaknesses. So it says here, collaborators usually focus on incentivizing, enabling, or convening others to innovate, but may be missing opportunities to foster innovation within their organizations as well. So what it is saying is that we're setting up partnerships externally, we're looking for opportunities externally. However, as a collaborator, oftentimes we're not looking internally to achieve those similar opportunities. Then it goes a little bit deeper. It tells me what my typical strengths are so that I can celebrate those within my team or my unit. We can use that to increase buy-in. If we're looking to have conversations with people to bring them on board with any innovation process we're planning, we can use that to manage up and say, hey, look, this is something that's working well. And then with regards to any of the risks that are identified here, also, we can see, excuse me. Okay. So questions coming through in Slido. So I will reiterate, please, Johanna has requested that we use Slido for the questions, and we'll refer to those in a moment. Again, the risks are also then outlined so that you get a snapshot of what are some of the common risks with my profile, and you can start having conversations. You can start planning as to how can you mitigate these risks. What resources do you need to start identifying and putting into place so that you are able to alleviate some of these risks. Then also you can see here we have guidance. What are some of the key steps that you can go through to affect change? What are some of the low-hanging fruit that you can identify here? So through here, guidance, strengthen your internal innovation processes, complement your ability to optimally direct and foster innovation internally. So again, talking to you about building structures and processes. Then you have the option of sharing that result. You can send that result to people within your team or your unit or your organization. But critically, the next step, and this is where it gets very exciting for us as the staff college, and of course, as people who have been working around promoting it, is when we click on detailed results, we then get all of these wonderful rocket ships. And this is telling us where our strengths and weaknesses lie. Now, because I was just randomly selecting some of those diagnostic elements. You'll see that these are pretty standard. However, this is where it's great for us to go deeper with as a baseline, because we can identify in this that here we're at 73%. Perhaps we don't need to focus our resources too much on what's called the evaluation element of the toolkit or the evaluation tools, but here at 61% under what is called the architecture tools, perhaps that's where we need to focus when we start looking at internal partnerships and internal structures. Now here is just to give you an outline. This is why we have all these rocket ships and little astronaut folk, is the acronym SPACE. Now this is 5 critical areas for innovation that were identified in the development of the toolkit, and it's under these elements, under this SPACE space, elements that each of the tools is incorporated. So the S stands for strategy, P is partnerships, A is architecture, C is culture, and E is evaluation. So again, breaking down this very large and sometimes imposing, intimidating structure of what is innovation, what does it mean to me, breaking that down into units that you are able to access and identify the tools in that as you design step by step your interventions. Again, based on the diagnostic element, you have a readout here of your results and some of the steps that you may be able to take. So again, if I take the architecture element, which here is our lowest at 61%, architecture, it says here that based on your responses, your unit provides minimal resources and infrastructure for achieving sustained innovation. So that's immediately something that we can focus on as to how can we change that. Does not source diverse innovation ideas and solutions, and should focus on improving approach for collecting ideas both internally and externally. So again, immediately there is a guide, there is a tip, there is a hint as to what is your next step so that you can help to alleviate and address some of the issues that the diagnostic has identified. You have examples of scaling success. However, scaling innovation remains difficult, and you consistently tailor innovation to its end users. So it's actually giving you, again, something to hold on to, something that you can promote, something you can share, so that you can start to gain buy-in, feel positive about where you are in this process. Now here you'll note underneath these readouts, and of course there is this, this information that you are able to go through and have these conversations once again, but you can click on recommended tools. Now this here is the bookshelf, the resources that exist to you. And once again, so as not to overwhelm people with all of the tools, there are 21 tools that have been developed by UNIN and by UNIN members and through the CEB as they put together the toolkit. So as not to overwhelm people, there are these recommended tools which, based upon the diagnostic that you have undertaken, what are the ones that are going to allow you to affect the most change and to start these interventions by which you can then come back and check for impact on your baseline. So here we can talk about headlines of the future. You'll recall that we were told that the collaborators were looking outward too much. We were focusing on developing partnerships externally rather than examining what innovation can do internally. So the headlines of the future tool allows us to discuss within our team or our unit, what do we look like in the future? What are some of the headlines? What is the vision that we want for innovation within our team, our unit, or our organization? Similarly, scanning the horizon, preparing to partner. So we've got a lot of partnerships going on externally as a collaborator. How do we internally prepare to take advantage of those partnerships? Environmental scanning, operating models. And you can see again that once you've looked at the recommended tools, which you may or may not download, they're entirely up to you, you also have access to all of the other tools under the SPACE acronym: strategy, partnerships, architecture, culture, and evaluation. Now what I'm going to do is I'll open up one of these tools so that you are able to see what they look like. And whoops, then we got an error message. That's okay, these things happen. But I'll see if it will allow me. Okay, so you can see here, and before anyone raises their hand and asks questions, yes, I can assure you that this is a locked PDF, and we are very aware of how innovative that is. However, in the design phase of the toolkit, it was identified that PDFs were best served for people in the field to share and to work on offline. And so as its launch structure, at its launch status, the toolkit has these PDFs available. The UNSSC is developing learning and collecting stories around the toolkit. And as part of our future vision for the toolkit, we will be building out pages around these tools, of which each of these PDFs will be an element. We'll also be incorporating stories of use, stories of contextualization. But at this stage, you have this PDF, which again, allows you to have discussions. You've got the objectives of what this tool is going to outline. You've got how you need to prepare yourself or your team before you start this process. It outlines the steps you're going to take. And then it gives you these steps, the questions that you need to ask, the steps that you need to take. How can you scope this? How can you work with your team to increase buy-in and build focus? There's a case study here, the International Diplomacy Organization. And this is one of these case studies that I was talking about at the start of the process. Critically also, there are these references, downloadable references for you also to use. One other element that I do want to highlight to you is the worksheet. Yes, a locked PDF. However, again, this is a worksheet that you are able to work with, whether it be across dispersed teams, whether it be within your unit or your team, so that again, you can start to take insight from the diagnostic, take insight from the tool that you have been given, and then examine, as you contextualize, what does this mean for us? How can we make this work for us? I'll come back to the presentation now. We'll run through very quickly the profiles, again, that you are potentially given: motivator, strategist, collaborator, implementer, early stage innovator, and trailblazer. I will run into those a little bit deeper in a moment, but if we can use Slido on the poll, let's get some responses here. If you have completed the diagnostic, what was your innovation profile? So we'll just give you a minute or two to respond to that, again on Slido.
Thank you, Baron. And maybe while people are voting, a quick update to you. We have about 52% of people who are dialed in and who completed the Slido poll said that they are not yet familiar with the toolkit.
Oh,
and
okay.
11% say they are familiar with it. Another third familiar with, but not in a lot of detail. So
okay.
Thank you for introducing us. No,
that's good. Thank you for the opportunity. That's absolutely critical that we start to share the toolkit and the use the utility it may have. This is great. So we'll look at the poll. I see a couple of questions which I'm happy to respond to as the poll results come in. I see the most voted up on good morning by Anonymous. Good morning. Isn't this diagnostic tool a simple opinion poll? At its heart, yes, we have to be honest with you. It is. However, what it is also is it's a diagnostic tool that needs to be taken on the basis of discussions, conversations with yourself, with your team, your unit, or if possible with your organization, so that you are able to understand your baseline. You're able to understand how ready you are to undertake innovation. And critically also, as I mentioned before, this diagnostic opinion poll is preserved within the diagnostic element of the toolkit. So you are able to undertake interventions based on the feedback that you receive, taking the collaborator profile as an example, perhaps working on identifying better internal partnerships that are possible, ways that you can promote innovation internally. Undertake that, and then you can go back and undertake the diagnostic again. So to your point, absolutely, but this is it's how we use this within our own context. It's how we work to contextualize the feedback, the results that are given, and the diagnostic elements that are given. So for the poll, where are we? Shall I move on, Johanna? I'm in your hands.
Go for it. We have on the poll, we had about 33 votes for the second question. And again, around 60% said they haven't completed the diagnostic yet.
Okay.
And then there's a good mix of motivators, strategists, 15% collaborators. So that's very encouraging.
15% collaborators. Yes, absolutely. Partnerships is important.
All right. So let's go on.
That's good. Let's move on. Okay, thank you for your feedback on that. Thank you for taking part in the poll. We'll move on. I'm going to run quickly through the strengths and weaknesses of the profiles. There may be elements here that you can identify with, even without having taken the diagnostic, but there may be elements here that are familiar for you. But our first profile is that of motivator, and Johanna has just indicated some of you were identified as motivators. So they are the strongest at developing an innovative culture. They work to foster a culture of innovation. Now, when we think about the tools, one of the most downloaded tools to date has been how to foster a culture of innovation. What we are finding, and again, Johanna and unit members will be much more familiar with this than ourselves, but what we are finding is that people are having innovation incorporated into their PERs, into their TORs, into their job descriptions, with no then discussion around what that is. And so there is one of the key questions that we are receiving is, I've been told to either become more innovative, or I've been told to set up an innovation structure within my team unit or organization. What do I do now? And I think that that's one of the really great elements that the toolkit can assist with, because the tools understand that as an issue and have built in the processes that are required behind that, again, incorporating the worksheet that will allow you to step-by-step contextualize that, dependent upon your resources, dependent upon the buy-in that you have and the conversations you're able to undertake. Staff, motivated staff feel encouraged and empowered to innovate. However, some of the weaknesses of the profile may struggle to effectively direct and implement innovative ideas and initiatives being generated. So again, a lot of innovative ideas perhaps being generated, but how do we give structure? How do we prioritize that? How do we identify that? How do we work on what is doable? And again, there are elements within the toolkit that will allow you to undertake that. The strategist, the next strength, strongest at setting a strategy, perhaps unsurprisingly, for innovation, typically understand and create alignment around common goals and objectives, generally internally. However, some of the weaknesses of the strategist profile is that they lack, that's my dog. He's sick of us being inside, so I apologize for him. They may lack the right structures or processes to effectively execute on their plans. So again, understanding from a strategist point of view, understanding where you wish to go, understanding the benefit of increased innovation, perhaps even down to a contextual level. However, what is it that we then do next? How can we work on the processes and the structures in a stepped manner when we're working to create buy-in, when we're working to have to manage up, when we're starting to have discussions around resources? What are some of the ways that we can work to move forward? So again, tools incorporating elements behind that. Collaborator, which was the one that I had introduced, or the one that the diagnostic pointed me towards. We've gone through this. Again, mostly external, mostly looking outwardly at developing partnerships, however, not spending a huge amount of time fostering innovation from within, even when such internal innovation would be able to contribute to more effective outcomes on the external side. The next one, implementer, strongest at setting up an architecture for innovation. So they have innovation activities, they have processes put in place from idea through to implementation. However, some of the weaknesses is in regards to measuring impact, which when we're talking about building buy-in from an internal point of view, but also from a stakeholder point of view, we need to be thinking about how we can measure impact, how we can build that measurement of impact into our planning from the start of any innovative intervention, and how do we share that? How do we report that? So you will recall that one of the key elements, one of the 5 pillars of the SPACE architecture or structure is evaluation. And so that is critically in there to meet this weakness that implementers tend to have. Early stage innovators have some projects going on, perhaps not systematically cultivating innovation, and they may face or perceive barriers to innovating further. Usually, or oftentimes, I won't say usually, oftentimes around resources, not just financial resources, human resources, social capital, buy-in, how to communicate reporting, how to communicate the projects that they already have. The weakness may struggle in developing the right strategy and structures to identify, elevate, and direct. So it's about how do we bring, how do we get people to understand this? How do we get people to identify with what we're doing? How do we share this? And also, how do we work on impact? Trailblazers effectively drive and set the direction of innovation. There's a strong understanding of the ecosystem. However, there can be weaknesses in regards to sustainability and in regards to impact. So it tends to be a lot of very innovative activities without scoping to the impact and evaluation of these also. So again, you go through the diagnostic, and I encourage you to do so. You go through the diagnostic, you are given one of these profiles which acts as a baseline. You have strengths and weaknesses identified. You have the recommended tools identified for you so that you are able to start interventions. You're able to identify roles and responsibilities, timelines. You're able to identify where possible resources, whether financial or non-financial, so that you are able to start working on the information given to you by the diagnostic. The tools, as I have mentioned, 21 of them developed through the UN system and with the engagement of UNIN under these 5 elements: strategy, partnerships, architecture, culture, and evaluation. And these are the tools. I've shown you just earlier on what they look like online. This is a breakdown. So under strategy, for example, if we just have a look here, we're looking at the blueprint for developing scenarios. What are our headlines of the future? How do we analyze the ecosystem that we're in? How do we identify what our portfolio is or could be? And how do we effectively plan innovation so that we're able to sell that on, able to communicate that effectively to get both internal and external buy-in? And you can see here any number of tools that relate to these 5 areas of the space structure. Now, one thing too that you will find in the tools is that often they will connect to other tools. So say, well, look, if you're looking at defining a value proposition, you should probably also be looking at user-centered design so that you can really target that better. So you can see that there are tools that can be identified to be used in parallel so that you are able to amplify the impact of the use of those. When do we use the toolkit? Now, this is a question that really came about from people when they were trying to increase buy-in and use of the toolkit within their agencies or entities. Obviously, when you want to innovate, we're seeing also people saying that the toolkit is very useful when starting or wanting to start conversations or when wanting to manage up. As indicated, the toolkit can provide baselines for you so that you're able to come back to the diagnostic after undertaking interventions. When you want to validate or test, when you want a framework on which to build your ideas. When you want to contextualize, now that's critical, obviously, and that's why the worksheets have been incorporated into the tools as well, so that you are able to take a step back, see what worked for another UN organization, analyze what similarities and differences exist between that case study and your own reality, and then see where you need to push in, pull out, where you can work to contextualize. When you want to scope more effectively, oftentimes we're getting reports from people using the toolkit that they're finding this very, very useful when they have a large number of innovative ideas within teams or units, or even innovative processes and practices undergoing, whereas the toolkit is allowing them to identify which ones are working, which ones had most impact, which ones can we evaluate more readily, and which ones can we then scale. And of course, when you want to be curious. I'm going to take some questions now. I'm happy to take some questions in a moment around the toolkit. There's been some put on Slido, but I will just highlight the next 5 30-minute webinars that we will be undertaking starting next week on the 24th of March. We'll be looking at one of the strategy tools and then sharing or hearing from you as to how this could be useful, how it has been useful, and how you intend to scope or use this tool. Similarly, we'll also be doing that for each of these structures on the dates indicated, and Johanna will be making contact with you around those. I know that the dates have been sent out, but as she said at the top, if you have not received those calendar invites, please do let her know. If you have any questions around the toolkit that do not come up today, or you wish to ask in the future, I'm available at innovation@unssc.org. And again, the login for the toolkit is un-innovation.tools/register. And now I'm open for questions. So